Hello, everybody. Happy Monday.
Hi.
Hi. We're live now. It's LGBT Live Mondays at 5:30. And just to say, I'm sorry, there might be a bit of a delay when I'm talking, but it's just the computer that I'm on. So let's hear from Youth Work Ireland, Cavan Monaghan, and I'm in the Youth Information Project. And we have Niamh.
I'm Niamh. I used to be part of the LGBT group in Carrickmacross, and now I'm a volunteer.
And I'm Barry. I'm the LGBT Youth Development Worker for Cavan Monaghan.
And my dog has decided to arrive as well. So, hello, doggy.
I just barked.
Right.
That's an indication of how this meeting goes.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have a couple of things we're going to chat about today. A couple of just random topics about LGBT young people in Ireland. And I suppose somebody has reached out to myself and Barry, a concerned parent of somebody else, to say that there's an LGBT young person and their parents are not very supportive of them being LGBT. And, you know, the feelers were put out there to see what would the parent think if the person was LGBT, and they didn't get a good reaction. So I just wanted to talk to you guys about this and kind of say, you know, what can you do as a young person if you don't feel your parents are being supportive, or what could somebody do to help a young person like that? Put that to Barry first.
Thanks very much, Melissa. Yeah, I don't know. I think it kind of feeds back into something that we talked about a few weeks ago when we were talking about having that sort of supportive circle, having that support network around you when you do come out. There's nothing. Unfortunately, there's no definitive answer to the question. I think it's a case of having that network, having family members or having friends, having a school teacher or a youth worker or somebody else in your support network as such to fall back on should things not necessarily go as you would like in the home setting. It's really difficult, and that one particular case that you're speaking of where that parent reached out to us to support their child's friend, like hearing the negative comments at home is heartbreaking, especially for a young person. I'm sorry, I'm finding it really. I just looked at you, Melissa, there, and all I could see was the dog, and it totally distracted me.
Sorry.
But having that. No, you're fine. You're fine. No, don't put the dog down on the ground, that is, or in any other way. Sorry. Having the support of any other adult, I suppose, to ensure that you're safe, that they can point you in the right direction if you need extra support. It's an awful disgrace. It's an awful shame whenever a parent turns on a young person simply because of how they identify their sexuality. But again, a lot of the time it may be a thing that the parent just doesn't feel equipped to deal with it as well. It mightn't necessarily be that the parent genuinely disagrees with the young person coming out or with their identity, but it may be a case that they just don't feel that they are equipped to support the young person. And sometimes out of fear, out of lack of education, we make very stupid choices as human beings, and that's across the human race. We're always making stupid mistakes. We're always saying the wrong thing in situations where we just don't have the answers, and out of fear, we may react the wrong way. I just went on an absolute ramble there because the dog distracted me. I'm blaming your dog, Melissa. No, I'm joking.
But I know, yeah, I know what you're saying. Like, it's even maybe what you think about giving the parents time. You know, it may be something that the young person has known for quite a while.
Yeah.
But now maybe the young person is telling the parents, so the parent needs time too. What do you think, Niamh?
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And as a young person, like the situation with your family is always difficult, because you know, and you're walking around, and it's almost like, as I said before, they don't know who you are, and it can be very off-putting for the young person too. But it is exactly, it's the thing. It starts off small, just little hints here and there. Try and sit down with them and explain it through with them and see if they get it, and give them time. Exactly. But the main point is to remember that it's not your fault, and it will never be your fault. If they can't understand it, they can't understand it. It's not your fault. And that don't feel afraid that if you have to distance yourself from people like that, even if it is a family member, do, because it's not worth putting yourself under that pressure and accepting that behavior or that verbal speech coming home every day to your parents or whoever it might be.
Yeah. And even when you're saying there, like, it's not accepting the negative behaviors. So even if that things do get said to you, it's kind of not accepting them or taking them on, or maybe trying to challenge the person about what they're saying or what they're thinking, because sometimes, or a lot of the times, it's ignorance, or it's miseducation, or lack of education. So it's kind of trying to challenge if it's safe for you to do that.
Yeah, but that's the thing too. It's picking your battles as well, because again, depending on the family, depending on the individual situation, challenging someone's behavior when they are your senior, when they are your parent, can be an extremely difficult thing. And that's why I think it is, again, you need to revert back to your support network. Find a teacher, a youth worker, or somebody that you trust, that you can have these conversations around how best to support you in this situation. If somebody straight up rejects what you're telling them, you need to give them time. So it's about approaching the situation intelligently, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way at all, but knowing when it's best to stand up. There's no point in standing up and shouting and screaming about not being accepted whenever somebody is telling you that they disagree with you and what you're telling them outright. Go back and revisit and find somebody to support you through that there, and maybe a conversation with another adult might help your parents see the light, see it in a different light, should I say, yeah, sorry.
And that's why, Barry, we have the youth groups. That's why we have the youth groups, to be a support to young people. And I know from having LGBT youth groups before, that there might have been young people that were at that their parents may not have known that they were LGBT, or they weren't getting support at home. And just having that hour in the week or 2 hours in the week where they went into the space and were able to be themselves, have chats about things, what was going on at school, what was going on at home, testing things out, you know, even like that, if somebody's trans or something like that, testing out the name with us in the group and how it felt to be called that name.
Yeah.
All that, you know, that's what it's there for. That's what that support is there for, that we're trusted adults that will give them that help and that support that they need, that they mightn't be able to get at home at the moment.
Exactly. And I think another thing to remember is that we also have the support out there for parents as well. That it's something that we do need to be mindful of at all times as well. As Niamh said already, this is a journey that we have been on ourselves as an individual, maybe for years and years, trying to understand who we are. So we have finally come to some sort of settlement in ourselves. For parents, it's not the same. So allowing them a space to actually ask questions as well. So that might be an option. If somebody's not receptive to what you're telling them, you can let them know to contact the likes of myself or Melissa. We have held parents' evenings, haven't been greatly attended, but we have had them in Cavan, Monaghan and Carrickmacross pre-COVID-19 lockdown. And it is something that we are looking at opening up again as soon as we possibly can. But parents can contact us at any time for support or advice around how best to support their young people. So keep that in mind as well. Yeah. Should you face any sort of rejection.
Okay. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. So I'm going to move on now to a different subject, and it was just something that was coming into my mind because there was something on the radio there today about it, but LGBT people and sport. And I know from even having the LGBT group that a lot of young LGBT people, they're not really attracted to sport or getting involved in sport, and I think it's worth exploring why that is. So what's your experience, Niamh, of sport, or your friends that are LGBT and what they think?
Well, I never liked sport. I was never a big fan of sport. I hated every aspect of it. I hated my main thing was my self-image was always poor. And that's what a lot of LGBT people suffer with. Actually, everyone suffers with. And to go into somewhere and then be told to do the exact thing that everyone else can do, and you're standing there and you go, well, I can't do that as good as you can. You do tend to compare yourself, and then you make yourself kind of, you draw yourself down. And it's a negative kind of cycle. And what happens, you get uncomfortable in your own body, and especially with trans people, I can only imagine how hard it is. One, if they wear a binder, you're not meant to do strenuous exercise anyway, and to try and explain that to someone would be very, very difficult. And I suppose that's why most people just refrain from doing it altogether. They don't want that conversation. They don't want to have a conversation with someone and go, look, I can't do this because I can't. And I don't know, really. That's my only experience with it. Is my self-image I couldn't do it. I kept comparing myself to others, and then I felt incapable, and it was a vicious cycle.
Yeah. I know, and what you're saying is, it's very difficult then, and thanks for sharing that. But even around that, when your self-image, if you're having difficulties with your self-image, then to have to go into the likes of changing rooms, to have to wear particular things for your sports, your jerseys or your shorts or whatever it is that you have to wear, whatever the sport is, it can be difficult to do all those things. And even then there's the issue around same-sex changing rooms, and then there's then going into the next thing is of same-sex teams, and then you might identify with, you might have to go through this whole explanation of that you might be trans and you're not on the right team then. So there's loads of issues around competition and the whole thing of being on a male team or a female team, because I think that's what they were talking about. And there was something about rugby today, that the rugby are not going to accept trans women on their team. I think it was something like that. Have you any experience of that, Barry, or any of the young people not really being interested in sport?
Well, it's not really something that's come up in conversation, but I suppose, like Niamh, I can talk about my own experience, and it is, I think in sport in general, there is a sort of, especially within the male sports, there is a sort of toxic masculinity there where, and I hate that's a phrase that's been used so much in the last few years, but it's very rampant in changing rooms, in male changing rooms, in whatever sports. Being the gay, the queer, the fag, all that sort of stuff. That's language that's used in changing rooms, and that even goes back to like my time in secondary school. It's one of the reasons why I avoided PE. It's one of the reasons why a lot of LGBT people avoid PE, because that's a place that can't really be monitored by teachers. Like the changing room is the young person's place where they should feel safe to get changed and that. But obviously teachers can't monitor that there, so that behavior does sort of go, and it does go unchecked, primarily because the people who can challenge the behavior are other students or other team players, and you're not necessarily going to put yourself in the line of fire by being that person that stands up, because once you stand up, you're also going to be the target the next time that there's anything said. So yeah, like I never would have been massively into sport, but I would say there was sports when I was in school, such as basketball, that I actually enjoyed. I wasn't necessarily any good at it, but I shied away from it simply because the whole behavior in locker rooms afterwards was kind of hard to deal with.
Mm.
Everybody's frozen on my screen.
Absolutely. And yeah,
sorry, you were still there.
Yeah, there's that and I forgot about that. Is the whole locker room kind of mentality and all of that that's going on. And even then as well with competitive sport, it's about contact, which can be difficult as well, that if you have issues with self-image or with your own body, then when you have to make contact in your sport, that can be difficult. But I did actually, it was a tweet or something recently that I read, and it was somebody saying, why was I always told that I was bad at sport, but there's loads of other sports that I could have been doing, which I now realize as an adult, which is like kayaking or hill walking, or yeah, what's that posh name for hill walking? I can't remember.
Gymnastics. Oh,
What?
I have no idea.
What is it?
Mountaineering.
Yeah. And this person was saying, I actually love all those sports where it was more about just about them and competing against themselves rather than competing, with a ball, all these kind of activities with a football or a rugby ball or whatever it is. So there is more, and and I think as well, it could be just, sports can be narrowed down into very particular things, even in school and as a child. Go out and kick the ball out there. That's what So but there is other kind of sports to explore. Barry, you got your hair cut before we move into the next topic. It's lovely. Did you hear me? No, he's frozen. Oh, he's gone.
Yes, sorry,
my comment.
My connection is playing silly beggars on me, so apologies. I'm trying to switch over to a hotspot here. My Wi-Fi's gone mental.
Okay, well, we'll keep going for a minute while you're going. Niamh, I was just, a big topic as well that came up with the LGBT group was around the lack of sex education for LGBT young people in school. And, it would be a big topic of how basically it didn't even come into the equation of you getting sex education for about being LGBT. So do you want to tell us a bit about your experience of that?
I didn't even know it existed. I went to a Catholic school, so it was definitely like, no, you never even hear the word. It would never been ever spoken of. And it was like, I was quite innocent. I just believed that they didn't for a long time. And then after a little while, I was like, no, surely they must do. And then lucky enough, I started going to the Carrick Youth Group, and we got an LGBT sex education talk, and it just completely enlightened me. I was like, well, that makes so much more sense now. Like, now I understand. And it's unfortunate it's not taught in schools, because there is so many LGBT people out there, and they don't know. There's no one to turn to for that sort of information, where you should get it at school. It's a learning curve that a lot of LGBT people had to just learn on their own, and it's very, very unfortunate in that sort of sense.
Yeah. And do you mean you got the one we did, the workshop we did?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
So we provide, because this was said in the group, we did actually go out and get a facilitator to come in and do specifically sex education for LGBT young people, and it was delivered by Dundalk Outcomers. And you know, we had a big group of young people there like that this was the first time they were getting any proper type of LGBT sex education. But even at saying that, if you talk to any young people, they'll say the sex education, never mind LGBT, is very, very limited in schools, and it's not being delivered anyway, or it's just about the biology of sex rather than all of the different things that you should be learning about or exploring or talking about, how to put on a condom, STIs, oral sex. All these different things are not being discussed. It's basically, you know, a biology lesson. So it's something.
A lot of the time the people that are delivering that there aren't necessarily comfortable in delivering the programs as well, especially within the school setting, because they know these young people as educators, as people who deliver other programs in the school. So for a lot of people, it's very much, it's just an add-on to something, and they want to get through it as quickly as possible so they can move on with the rest of the curriculum. And I think one of the problems around sex education, and this is across the board, a lot of it is about, it's about prevention, and it's about looking at STIs as being the only thing that you need to get educated on. But there's so much more, and thankfully, like, the youth services have been actually backing up our education system for a long time and providing these supports for young people. Sex education shouldn't be about STIs and about preventing pregnancies and things like that. It should be about healthy relationships. It should be about I'm trying to think of the right words here. It should be about healthy relationships, but it should be about
healthy relationships,
sexual relationship, and understanding your own body and not being afraid of it, not being afraid of having a conversation around what a healthy sexual relationship is. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of Irish society, a lot of civil society is afraid to have that conversation around healthy sexual relationships. We shouldn't be afraid of it, and young people should feel empowered by their own bodies. I think it will sort of go back to something Niamh said a moment ago, though, about having poor body image. And again, I think this comes from this place where we're not allowed to talk about sex. We're not allowed to talk about our sexuality, about our body parts. Obviously, there's a time and a place, but if you have a healthy relationship with somebody, you should be able to have these conversations and not be afraid of who you are, or your body, or how you identify, or your feelings. There's so much around sexual health education that isn't just about STIs, and I think it's something that we need to nationally look at and address. Because our young people are getting so repressed and so afraid of their own bodies that when it comes to actually needing to have support, they don't know who to turn to. And I just went on a wee rant there, but that's because I was missing there for a couple of minutes and my Wi-Fi went crazy. So you're welcome. Sorry.
Yeah, but you're right in terms of, like, when stuff like that is being taught, it's going down the negative road again, you know. Like, here's all the negatives from sex, when you should be talking about that sex is supposed to be a positive experience, a loving experience. And like you're saying, it's more than, it has to be about healthy relationships, you know, about consent, and about being able to talk to your partner and talking to them about your relationship and what you want out of the relationship, and that you are both respected, and also on top of that, that you take on your responsibilities.
Yeah. Now again, I kind of took away from the LGBT sex education, which until we can address the entire sex education and the lack of proper sex education in the country for the entire population, then when you address that, hopefully the LGBT will be encompassed in properly restructuring sex education for young people. And I don't think it's right that the youth services are carrying the burden of that either. Like, this should be something that's happening at home. Young people aren't told the birds and the bees, for want of a better phrase. They're not told that there until it's brought up in the schools. And again, because these conversations aren't happening in the home, when it is being discussed in the schools, young people are so giddy and nervous because somebody's actually talking about sex to them, that they're not taking in the information that they're being given either. So it needs to start at a much younger age in the home. So whenever the educators are bringing it out in the schools and when the youth workers are bringing it out, that people feel more comfortable having these conversations. Shut up, Barry. Okay. The end.
But sure,
I need more coffee.
the other thing then is that they're getting their education from whatever they're watching, and that, you know, could be porn or whatever. So they're getting their education from the wrong place as well.
Yeah, and the rumors in the playground.
You're right. I remember going into a school, and I went into 6th class to do sex education with them, and a lot of them spent their time with their heads on the table laughing because they just were not ready for this conversation to happen, and they were so shocked that it was so embarrassing, that you know, like that, it was no good me coming in and doing 1 or 2 sessions with them. It's something that has to be a continued conversation. Anyway, Barry, we're coming up to time now. We were talking about your hair. That's what I was saying, your hair.
Yeah, I look like I've been plugged into the mains.
You got it done.
Yeah, that's my fella decided he was going to cut my hair. Well, I asked him because I was missing the hairdressers. I was miss having the hair tight, and he took the clippers to it, and he didn't want to go this short. I insisted on it. So yes, this was a choice. It wasn't a mistake, and I love it. Thank you. You're welcome. Sorry.
Oh, it looks great.
Thank you.
When I went to the hairdressers, and it took 4 hours to get me back to normal.
Yeah.
So
yeah. It's one thing about lockdown. At least we can go to the professionals again.
Yeah.
I cut
Exactly.
I cut my partner's.
Okay, we're going to leave it there for today. You what?
I cut my partner's hair, his dad's hair, and the dog's hair all in the one day during COVID. And I was looking at them all three, but they all kind of looked the same, and I was kind of like, what have I done?
Yeah, I suppose, Melissa, before we do go, is for young people
you're multi-talented.
This time delay, sorry, it's crazy. I feel like I'm in Australia. No, before we do go, I think for young people, if they are looking for any information around sexual health or anything like that, to know that they can reach out to the likes of your service or my service for advice. But also the likes of your GP is actually a good stop as well. Like, if it's something that you're concerned about with your sexual health, don't be afraid to talk to your GP. Talk to a responsible adult, somebody you know and trust. If they don't have the answers, they'll point you in the right direction for the answers as well. There are clinics, obviously under lockdown, things in the sexual health stream is sort of very restricted at the moment. So continue to practice safe, use condoms, do all the sensible things if you are practicing sex, and don't be afraid to reach out for advice. But also, again, for the parent support, that other topic we were talking about earlier. If you're struggling, if your family's struggling with your sexuality or your gender identity, again, reach out to us, because we have and we do work with parents quite a lot in supporting them in understanding what it is to be a member of the LGBTI+ community.
That's perfect, Barry. I couldn't have summed it up any better. Okay, so listen, thanks, Barry. Thanks, Niamh. See you all next week.
Bye, everyone.